I killed a campaign. Today, we're going to be talking about the many reasons that a campaign might fizzle out, whether you're dealing with scheduling issues, lack of interest from your players, or something far, far worse. But with mine, I didn't realize it was falling apart until I was standing in the rubble. And yes, in hindsight, it probably should have been obvious that back-to-back vacations, followed by a move to another state, followed by starting a full-time software engineering immersive, all while still trying to maintain running a YouTube channel, is a lot to have on your plate. But at the time, I genuinely thought that I could just juggle it all. Spoiler alert, I could not. But here's the good news. If your campaign is struggling, it's not too late. Your campaign can come back, you can cast Revivify, and when you do it right, it might come back better than before. The trick is knowing whether you should revive it, and if you do, how to make sure it doesn't flatline again. So every campaign gives off warning signs before it dies. The problem is that most DMs don't realize it until it's too late. And first, there's always like the classic red flags. Players start missing sessions, or worse, they show up late, like halfway through the session types of late. And not just once or twice, it starts to become a regular thing. Or how about this? You've spent hours coming up with what you think are really cool moments to incorporate into your session. Big plot twists, epic battles, only for them to land with a dull thud. Crickets, silence, nothing. The kind of moments you know should have been highlights of your game, but your players just kind of seem detached. And then there's the ultimate gut punch. You ask the group what they'd like to do in the next game. You've got some potential plans, you've got ideas, but when you open the floor to everyone else, you get half-hearted responses, or even worse, absolute silence. It's like you're trying to start a conversation, but you're talking to a brick wall. And that brick wall might just be your own campaign. So if you're getting frustrated by some of these early indicators, it's important for you to decide at the top, is this campaign even worth saving? And before you decide, you need to run a post-mortem. Or if your campaign's not officially dead yet, is it a pre-mortem? But before we talk about the most common campaign killers and how to fix them, I realize that some people might not be aware of what evil forces conspired to kill their campaigns. So part of this definitely relies on intuition a little bit. So if yours isn't great, all hope is not lost. But if your players are telling you that there's nothing wrong with your game, that unfortunately doesn't mean that's necessarily true. There is a chance that they're just telling you what you want to hear, because even if they didn't love your campaign, they probably still love you. They probably don't want to hurt your feelings. So if your gut is telling you that they're just not into the type of game that you're running, chances are you're probably right. Even if your players won't say hard truths to your face, there is a chance that they'll be a little bit more forthcoming under the guise of anonymity. It's no secret that I'm a big fan of anonymous forums. I think they're a really great way to get honest feedback without putting that type of awkward pressure on your players to say things to your face, which is why I have made you guys a questionnaire template. I linked to it below, but it's just a basic Google form with the kind of common questions that can help you suss out what's going on, and a little mock message you can send with it to help get your players to respond. But this way you can try and get meaningful feedback on your campaign. Again, this is meant to be anonymous. Make sure that anything that collects their name or email is turned off. The most important part of doing these anonymous surveys, though, is that you can't be a little crybaby about them. Your feelings might get hurt. And yeah, it sucks when that happens. But if you truly want to get better at running games, you can't let your players see you take this type of feedback personally. And again, some people at your table might not just be the best fit with you. They might want a different type of game than you want to run, or might have very bizarre expectations of you, but you also might just need to level up your skills. And very few people are prodigies. There's nothing wrong with admitting that you have some areas to improve in. We all do, except for the prodigies. So if you get feedback that bruises your ego a little bit, go take a second to brood alone But then it's time to get to work. Every skill you use to run TTRPGs is a learnable skill. The only thing standing between you and being awesome is whether or not you're willing to put in the work and practice. You can do this. Also, if you're enjoying this video, please make sure to like and subscribe so the tubes that be know and show you more of my face in the future. Anyways, it's time to roll an insight check of your own to make sure that you don't have any of these common campaign killers. This one ruins more campaigns than anything else, and yeah, it's the one that got me. But scheduling problems aren't just one issue, they're really two separate ones. On one side you have DM burnout, and on the other side you have player availability. If you're the DM and you're struggling to keep up, you've really got two choices. You can either ease up on prep or consider changing your session frequency. Some of us, love going overboard with intricate world building, elaborate battle maps, tons of lore, and that's great. But I've said it once and I'll say it again, you don't need that. I know for a lot of us that daydreaming about this hobby is its own hobby in and of itself. But if your campaign is demanding more time than you actually have, it might be time to start trying to wing some of your sessions a little bit more. You don't need an entire city's faction map just because your players might use it. And don't forget, your players have great ideas. Going with the flow and following the things that they're indicating to you that they're interested in can make your prep time so much easier. When it's a player issue though, that's a bit trickier. But one of the best fixes I found is one of the simplest. Run a session if just 2 people can make it. I used to hate playing without the full group, but sometimes skipping sessions is worse, especially if it's not a super important part of your game. So if one player is missing, they're just off screen. But if you're missing multiple players, use it as an opportunity to shake things up. Consider doing a side quest, dedicating more time to personal character development, or even just running a one-on-one session. This can even be a great opportunity to try out one-shots of other systems. You can also try goofy one-page games like The Witch is Dead, or any of the games that the Party of One podcast covers. But I'm a big believer that lessons you learn from running different TTRPGs are very interchangeable. So this opportunity to explore other systems and other structures of games can really be a great chance to level up your game running skills. So congratulations, scheduling issues are now an opportunity in disguise. But what if your players just don't care anymore? I know this one can sting. It's probably the hardest pill to swallow as a DM. But if you really care about the game, you've got 3 options. Option 1, adjust your campaign to better fit the group. Maybe what you thought was exciting isn't to them, and that's okay. That's totally fixable. Option 2, transition to a group that's more aligned with the type of campaign you'd like to run. There's no shame in that. Sometimes the right fit isn't there and never will be. Remember, what you want to run matters too. And then there's option 3. Start with an entirely new game. Maybe it's time for a clean slate, and that's perfectly fine too. Sometimes it's just a case of wrong place, wrong time, wrong group, and it's time to just let it go and brush the dirt off your shoulders and try again. But before you do anything drastic, make sure you figure out why there's this lack of interest. Do your homework, guys. I know it's tempting to just chalk it up to a fundamental mismatch between you and the group, but often there is something that is more fixable. It's worth digging a little deeper because there's the chance that if you just tweak 1 or 2 things, your game can suddenly be 1,000 times better to them. So the most important thing, ask the right questions. Don't just throw yes or no questions at your players, especially not things like, do you like this game? Do not. You need the deep stuff, the juicy stuff. What's working? What's not working? Why? Look at that questionnaire. But maybe your players feel like the story's lacking a little bit, or feel like they don't really have meaningful choices and player agency in your game. Guess what? You can improve that. And you can learn to give your players the sense that their choices matter. Totally fixable issues if the other ingredients for fun are there. But here's another critical point when you realize there's that lack of interest from some of your players. Make sure you're giving the players that want out an actual out. One of the best things about reviving a campaign, it's the perfect time to let people who might be dragging down the energy a chance to gracefully bow out. And if you're lucky, this can be a great time for you to add in some fresh new faces to your campaign, or to just let the players who are really into it take the reins, take control. Either way, letting go of the people who aren't super into this campaign can really do a lot to reinvigorate the campaign and make things feel more exciting again. You know what's worse than a dead campaign? A toxic one. Real life tension can creep its way into your games, and then suddenly things get awkward. Ask me how I know. The thing is when that energy starts seeping into a group, it can ruin the fun for everyone. And as the DM, you have to be aware of when things are starting to go sideways. Now, ideally, session 0 is where you set the groundwork for this. That's a great moment for you to talk about your expectations for how people behave, how they deal with conflicts, all that fun, exciting stuff. But here's the thing, it's not a one and done deal. You can and should revisit these expectations if you start noticing some weird social interactions in your group. If you notice tension building or people getting uncomfortable, don't just let it ride out hoping that it will just resolve itself. You're the DM. Part of your role is to make sure this stays fun for everyone. Your players should feel like they're coming to a space that's fun and exciting, not one where they have to stress about personal interactions. So, you've decided that your campaign is worth saving. Now, how do you restart it? Well, the biggest challenge by far has to be that your players have definitely forgotten almost everything. And the worst part, you probably have too. And it's okay to tell your players at the start that this ride is gonna be a little bumpy. People, sane people, are understanding. Your first few sessions back are definitely going to be about refinding your footing, and that's a-okay. Temper your expectations. So part of this revival process is going to be about recapping and resetting your game. You're going to want to do this in a few ways. Some are unique to you as the DM, and some are ones you're going to share with your players. And the goal of this is to refresh the story without boring everyone to death. Now, if you're like me, you've got notes. But the problem? They look like absolute nonsense now. I always do stars and wishes. There's a note for a shadow cat. There's a wish for mouse! Exclamation points. There's dog! Exclamation 1. A lot of dog related things. Dog missions, dog armor, dog items, dog show, ugliest dog! Exclamations! And I have nothing about any of this in my actual note. What does this mean? Side note, this is a really great time to remind everyone to retype your notes at the end of a session. Please, guys, for you, make them into coherent sentences. I know that day I was burnt out because I ran back-to-back sessions with 2 different groups, but boy oh boy am I pissed at that version of me right now. So how do you piece this mess back together? Sometimes you don't. But chances are, if you don't remember something and it doesn't come up on the player's questionnaire, they probably forgot all about it too. So take it easy, don't stress too much about things you don't remember. Because again, this is a game. Games are supposed to be fun. So do your best and don't expect perfection from yourself. After you recap your notes, write one page, recapping the most important parts you would like your players to remember. Please note, there's a good chance your players do not read this one page. Please do not expect them to do homework to play games. This is just very helpful for the nerds like me out there that do like to study for games. But you'll also want to prepare a 3-minute tops little flashback recap type of moment for when you are all playing again. Again, this is just so you can incorporate the most pertinent things. That way your players aren't totally lost. This is not, I repeat not, a chance for you to lore dump about all sorts of things. And now you might think that the best way to reintroduce players to your campaign is through a gentle process, a slow reintroduction to everything. And you'd be wrong. Bigger is better here. So we're gonna jump in with a strong start. And this can look different to each group. Try to make this something that your group really enjoys though. So maybe it's big combats, maybe they like to play Scooby-Doo and... You guys, the dog-related thing. His pugilist class is the dog-related one. The Dog and the Hound? That last session he finally got his subclass and he didn't know what type of dog he wanted, so I created a situation where you could kind of pick one. We did it, gang. We solved our first mystery. To celebrate though, go check out Benjamin Huffman's pugilist class. It's one of my all-time favorites, definitely worth incorporating into your games. Speaking of jumping back into games though, you need to plan your first session like it's session 1, because it almost kind of is. Your first session back is a make or break moment. If you get it right, your players are hooked all over again. But if you get it wrong, you're kind of shoving your campaign back into the grave. Your main goal here? Reverse engineer your players to where they were in the plot. You need to weave in the most important details that they need to remember. That way future sessions can feel fun and exciting, and not a confused mess of, wait, who is that guy again? And even if your players are the type that take meticulous notes, you still need to be generous with information. Assume everyone has forgotten something, and make it easy for them to get back in the groove. One of the best ways to do this? Weave recaps directly into gameplay. Instead of dumping a huge lore refresher at the start of the game, like I told you not to do, scatter reminders organically into interactions. Lean into insight, perception, and persuasion checks, and consider even incorporating a lot more auto successes. That way you can deliver key bite-sized information in fun, actionable ways that don't feel like homework. For example, say a player wants to schmooze an NPC, but checking your own notes, you realize that yeah, they hate this guy. Instead of just letting it happen, slip in a quick memory cue, no roll required. Something like, as you approach him, ready to turn on the charm, moments flash through your mind. Him double-crossing you, stealing your gold, burning down your favorite tavern. Are you sure you want to butter him up? This lets players choose between sticking to their character history or breaking the mold. But this way they're not doing something just because they've completely forgotten about previous in-game moments. And some of these moments might feel a little awkward and railroady at first, but remember, you're just giving them the tools to make informed choices. They laid these tracks. You're just reminding them where they previously were headed. You also don't have to jump straight back into the main plot. There are plenty of creative ways to ease your characters back in. If your players were already a group for some time, consider a flashback to an early adventure that they might have had before this campaign started. If they weren't together before, maybe you run a game with some pre-gen characters set in the same world to just kind of get them re-immersed in your lore. You can also consider running them through a few side missions before they get back to the main plot. Maybe they've got a favorite NPC that needs a favor, or they heard about some cool magic item in a dungeon that's supposed to be pretty close by. Or you can throw a party! Yeah, that's what I'm doing. In my Underdark campaign, I was about to have a big event happen, and I thought that I should probably avoid it and not jump right back into where I was. But then I realized that instead of trying to avoid it until my players were re-immersed in the game, this was kind of actually the perfect excuse to get all of the major NPCs and kind of faction representatives all together in one place. So if you need a reason to reintroduce key NPCs and conflicts, a social event like a festival or gala or something along those lines might be the perfect way to jog your players' memories. The most important part of this process, though, circle back, not just once, not just in passing. Actually take the time to check back in with them a few sessions after you get going. Yes, I mean it. Again, because trust me, just because something feels good in the moment doesn't mean you're totally in the clear yet. This is the most crucial step to make sure that you and your players are both on the same page moving forward. You've put in all of this effort to bring the campaign back. Now you need to make sure it's actually working. Take some time to check in and figure out what plot hooks are they currently most excited to follow. What are their current character goals? Are there any lingering frustrations or elements missing from the game? And if your campaign needed some major fixes before, you might even want to consider a mini version of that questionnaire I posted, just to make sure that you're still on the right track. Now, don't go overboard and turn your game into this never-ending feedback loop. Trust me, I know nobody wants to be bombarded with constant surveys. But if something was broken before, you want to make absolutely sure that you're not just repeating the same mistakes just without realizing it. More information is your friend here. Because the goal here isn't just to keep your campaign alive, it's to make it better than it was before. So, have you ever had a campaign fizzle out? Or more dramatically implode? How did you handle it? Let me know below in the comments. And if you like this, make sure to check out my video on keeping your players engaged with nefarious world building techniques. But like, nice ones.